I'm Paul Talbot-Greaves, and today I'm in my studio here in the UK, and I'm going to be showing you in this course how to paint looser landscapes in watercolor. £200 weight, that's 425 grams, not surface paper. It's got a slight tooth to it, which is really nice for this kind of subject. So I'm not going to be overly careful with this. This whole starting point, this process or this layer is about placing the light. So I've worked out where my lightest colours need to be and what they are, and that's all I'm doing. I'm just going to place the light colours, not trying to paint anything detailed or specific. And it's good to have a little bit of blending between these, so I keep the whole wash going and I cover the entire paper. Yellow ochre, a little touch of sap green in there for these background hills. Yellow ochre and ivory black. Just capture the general colour of this building. Maybe sneak a little bit of light red in, just to vary it. Touch of yellow ochre down here, maybe on its own, just kind of brighten that area a slight touch because that's in the sunlight. And I bring these colours together so we get that nice fuse and blend. Yellow ochre, sap green, again just varying these, and a little bit of light red. So mixing colour on the paper, so important to get that variety into the painting, certainly at this early stage. Toning the colour with ivory black, so I've got yellow ochre, sap green, ivory black, constantly mixing in the palette. Look how I don't make a big pool of colour. You know, if you're using the same colours and you're mixing them in the palette, you're going to get a slightly different version every time, and that's what we need to achieve. It's not going to be wildly different, but making that slight difference so that we get the variety into the painting. A little bit of soft grass just growing at the side of this wall. Cobalt blue, some ivory black. Now I'm not going too strong with any of these colours. In fact, I'm keeping them all pretty much the same value. Just dampening down a little bit there as the wash dries off, so constantly keeping my eye on the wetness on the paper, because this wash, these colours, they really need to fuse together. You don't want any hard edges. You want this kind of thing going on where you get some nice softness and blends. So keep your eye on the overall wetness of the painting, and as soon as this starts to properly dry down, then I have to stop applying colour.
I hope you're enjoying this watercolor lesson. On our channel, we always share watercolor lessons from the world's top artists. And today, we have something special for you. Follow the link in the video description and sign up for a free online masterclass with another global watercolor star.
And we'll get this background field here. Now, instead of just painting it hard edged or just filling in a shape, I imagine that, you know, this is the first time I'm maybe painting this, and I try and create a little bit of excitement and engagement in the brushwork. So maybe we have a bit of dry brush. This is how to get the engagement with the viewer. Maybe a little bit of softness, and just spray a little bit and create a softer edge. Now that comes down beyond the wall, so we'll go through the wall because pretty much the same colour. Just being careful with the amount of black that I'm adding to the colour. I'm just literally using that to make a tone. Notice how I'm not trying to paint a wall. I'm still applying colour, albeit in more limited blocks. Okay, so now for this sap green and the light red. So by working in a layer like this, so working on top of that starting colour, it's giving me the richness to the colour and the density, that lovely finish that you get with the watercolour paint. So notice how I'm sketching with the brush, not trying to fill in any shape. In fact, there's no shape to fill in because I sketched it very loosely with a pencil, so it forces me to work in this way with a brush. Just mix in a little bit of thicker paint. To apply this wet into wet. Softening parts. Not everything, but there are some bits that just benefit from a little soft edge in between the hard edges and some of those dry brush edges. So where I see the light catching the wall, I'll just dampen that down. a little bit of water and blend one or two edges away of this. Okay, it looks quite drastic, but it won't be when it dries. I want to pick up a little bit of light on this gate. Just not quite got that light enough. It's just catching the sunlight. And with a rigger brush, a really fine pointed rigger. Again, just back to, well, I'll use this blue-grey for this. And I need a bit of water with it to get this to flow. But I'm going to get the feel of this wire into the painting because it's a nice lead in. It's another line. It's taking the eye in. Well, there we go, using loose brushwork, sketching. Remember to keep a sketchbook because that is the way forward for making loose paintings. It builds your eye-to-hand coordination and also those skills of holding the brush at the back and standing to paint. That gives you a looser finish as well. For the majority of the painting, I use French mops. So these are squirrel mop brushes. They hold copious amounts of colour. They form beautiful sharp points. You can bend them into shape. You'll see how they perform when I'm painting. But to be honest, you could create a whole painting just with one of these brushes. So I have a range of sizes for different sizes that I'm tackling in the painting. So if I'm using a big shape or creating a big shape, I'll use a big brush. And if there's a smaller shape, then I'll select a smaller brush. And that's why I have a range of sizes. There is no formula. I just grab a brush that, from my experience, is going to be about the right kind of size. I also use some flat brushes. These are sable flats. Again, they hold a decent amount of colour and they make a different brush mark. So this is why I use these. I just kind of mix up the brushes sometimes to get variety in the brush marks. These are really good for using on their corner and creating some of the nice fine lines, fine marks, calligraphic marks, different ways of creating marks in a painting. I have a couple of sable round brushes. These are just a little bit more springy than the squirrel mop brush. Again, they hold lots of colour, but they give a nice fine mark. They're quite precise in the way that they apply the paint. You don't have to use these because they are quite expensive. So, you know, the synthetic brushes now are really catching up, and you can quite easily use a synthetic brush to make the same marks in a painting. I keep these quite small because that's all that they're for, is making those smaller details. I also have a fine pointed rigger brush for capturing the finesse in a picture. So fine lines, wires, fencing, that kind of thing. Anything that's got a fine line to it, basically. So this is the way to get those details. Use a rigger brush, use it point down, and you'll get the performance out of it. Finally, I have, or occasionally, I have a synthetic hog. Finally, I have, or occasionally use, a hog brush. This is quite a stiff brush, bristle brush, and I'll either use it for scrubbing up paint off a dried watercolour, so maybe if I'm softening an edge or something after it's dried, or I'll load it with colour and fleck the colour onto the painting, so using it to create this fine sort of splatter and textures which can be really quite interesting. The palette I use is a folding Holbein palette, and I squeeze the colours around the edge and mix in the wells here, and when they get full I just wipe them out. What's interesting, and you'll see me do this in the course, is I always squeeze out fresh colour for every painting. So I'll look at the picture, I'll work out the colours that I want to use, and I'll squeeze those colours out ready. And when I finish the painting, this gets closed. Sometimes I have a damp sponge that I put inside it, and I just close that up, and that keeps the paints from drying off. Obviously over a prolonged period of time they might dry, but in between paintings it's great, it just keeps the paint nice and moist.
Yeah. So
other materials that I use in the course, a little water cup. You could use a jam jar or anything to keep your water in, but this has a nice serrated edge which makes a little bit of a brush rest. I have a spray bottle. Spray bottles are really useful for keeping a wash from drying. So if you see the wash is just losing its sheen, give it a little spray from about 18 inches away, and that'll increase the moisture level in the paper and allow you to continue with the painting. Sometimes I use the spray bottle quite close to the painting, and what that will do is just make the paint run. So it depends on what kind of effect that you want to achieve. I also have a little value strip. Now this value strip I've made on the computer, and if you're computer literate, it's quite easy to do. It's a grade of grey from 100% down to nothing, and I use this to gauge values from those grayscale images in the references. If you don't have a computer, or you don't have ability to do this on a computer, then it's quite easy to make one of these. So this is one that I've made from watercolor paper, and you start with neat black at one end. You can use black, or you can use Payne's grey, or any similar colour that's going to give you that real intensity. At this end we've got white paper, and then you have to judge the values in between, just diluting each one a little bit more so that each of these shows against its neighbour, and that helps you to again judge the different strengths, the different values in your painting, and that can make a huge difference to the success of a painting as well. A little bit of kitchen paper for wiping up, and we're ready to go. So those are the materials that I use and that I'm going to use throughout the course. So let's have a look at the next stage. So the paper I work with is Saunders Waterford, usually around about £200 weight. It's 100% cotton paper, so it behaves really well with the watercolour, absorbs it beautifully and gives you real professional handling. I'll either use a cold pressed paper or a rough paper. This is a cold pressed. The texture is slightly less pronounced than the rough surface. So it's great for making paintings that may have a little bit of extra detail, or where you want some harder edges or just more refinery to the painting. The rough surface is really quite rugged, and that helps me achieve a lot of dry brush marks. Let's just have a look at this painting here from underneath. So you can see where I've used a lot of dry brush. This is where I take the moisture out of the brush and just use only a limited amount of fluid, and that's sort of skimming the surface of the paper to catch that surface texture, and like I said, very easy to achieve on a rough surface paper.